The rattling thunder of wagon wheels along the dusty trail stopped abruptly as a single gunshot pierced the air, causing Grace Dawson to clutch her worn leather journal tightly against her chest. She'd been traveling for 3 weeks now, moving west after being run out of yet another town where whispers of witch and cursed followed her like hungry wolves. February 1876 was proving to be as cold and unforgiving as the people she'd left behind. Hunter Daniels lowered his rifle, the dead rattlesnake twitching in its final moments just feet from where the young woman sat frozen on her wagon bench. His eyes, the color of worn leather, assessed the lone traveler with caution. Women didn't survive long out here alone, especially not with winter's grip still tight on the Montana territory. "Madam," he called, tipping his hat with one gloved hand while the other kept a loose hold on the reins of his paint stallion. "That snake nearly had itself a meal. You all right?" Grace nodded stiffly, her copper hair catching the late afternoon sunlight beneath her bonnet. "Thank you, sir. I didn't see it." Hunter studied the ramshackle wagon and the single thin mare pulling it. No husband, no escort, just a woman who couldn't be more than 25 traveling alone through hostile country. "Where you headed?" he asked, straightening in his saddle. "Wherever I'm welcome," she answered simply, her voice carrying a hint of resignation that spoke volumes. Hunter's brow furrowed. He'd seen that look before, the wary gaze of someone who'd been chased out, scorned, rejected. "That's mighty vague territory, madam." Grace adjusted her bonnet, buying time to study the man. Tall, broad-shouldered, with a face weathered by sun and wind but not yet hardened by cruelty. His clothes were dusty but well kept, speaking of a man who took pride in what little he had. "I find specifics tend to close doors before they're opened," she replied carefully. A ghost of a smile touched Hunter's lips. "Fair enough." He glanced at the sky, noting the gathering clouds. "Storm's coming. My ranch is about 4 miles yonder." He pointed west. "You're welcome to shelter there tonight. Won't be proper, but my foreman's wife can chaperone." Better than being caught in what's brewing. Grace hesitated, weighing her options as the first cold droplets of rain began to fall. She had learned to distrust kindness as it often came with hidden costs. "I don't accept charity," she said firmly. Hunter laughed, a warm sound that seemed to push back the approaching storm. "Ain't charity, madam. We can strike a deal. You look capable enough, maybe you can help Martha with some chores in exchange." Lightning flashed in the distance, followed by an ominous roll of thunder. The decision made itself. "Lead on, Mr. Daniels, Hunter Daniels, and you are Grace Dawson." Hunter nodded, satisfied. "Follow me, Miss Dawson, and stay close." The rain began to fall in earnest as they made their way across the rugged terrain. Grace's wagon wheels struggled in the increasingly muddy ground, but Hunter remained patient, occasionally glancing back to ensure she was managing. The Double D Ranch came into view just as the storm unleashed its full fury, a modest main house with several outbuildings, a large barn, and corrals that suggested cattle operations. As they approached, a grizzled man of about 50 emerged from the barn, followed by a stout woman with a kind face. "Frank, Martha," Hunter called over the rain, "we've got a guest." Within minutes, Grace found herself ushered into the warm kitchen of the main house while Frank took care of her horse and wagon. Martha Wilkins, the foreman's wife, pressed a steaming cup of coffee into her trembling hands. "You're soaked through, poor thing," Martha clucked, already gathering dry clothes. "Hunter don't often bring strays home. You must have caught his eye." Grace stiffened. "It's not like that. He was merely being kind." Martha's eyes softened. "I meant no offense, dear. Hunter's a good man, lost his wife and baby to fever 3 years back. Hasn't looked twice at a woman since." The information settled uncomfortably in Grace's chest. She understood loss all too well. Hunter appeared in the doorway, his hat dripping onto the wooden floor. "Frank says your wagon wheels split. Won't be going anywhere for a few days at least." Grace set her cup down with a sharp click. "I can fix it myself if I have the tools." "No doubt you could," Hunter replied, a hint of amusement in his voice. "But with this rain, nothing's getting fixed till it dries out." Martha interjected smoothly. "We've got the spare room ready. You'll stay until it's fixed, no arguments." Grace found herself installed in a small but clean bedroom at the back of the house. Through the window, she could see the rain lashing against the barn where dozens of cattle huddled for shelter. Despite her unease at being dependent on strangers, exhaustion soon pulled her into a dreamless sleep. Morning brought a strange quiet. Grace dressed quickly in her own clothes, now dried by Martha's careful attention, and made her way to the kitchen. Hunter sat at the table, his expression grim as he studied a piece of paper. 27, he said without looking up. 27 cattle lost in the night. Martha placed a plate of eggs in front of Grace. The river flooded the lower pasture, second time this winter. Hunter folded the paper and tucked it into his shirt pocket. If this keeps up, we'll be finished by spring. His eyes finally met Grace's. How'd you sleep? Well, thank you, she replied, sensing the tension in the room. I'm sorry about your cattle. Hunter nodded, then stood abruptly. Martha, show Miss Dawson around today. I've got to ride to town, see if Jenkins will extend our loan. After he left, Martha sighed heavily. Third year of bad luck. First the drought killed his crops, then the mountain lion attacks last fall, and now these floods. Folks in town are starting to talk. Grace paused mid-bite. Talk? Some say the double D is cursed. Martha crossed herself quickly. Nonsense, of course, but people look for reasons when misfortune keeps striking. Grace swallowed hard, too familiar with how quickly talk turned to accusations. I should leave as soon as possible, Martha waved dismissively. Nonsense, Hunter could use the help whether he admits it or not. That boy's too proud for his own good. Throughout the day, Grace helped Martha with household tasks, but her mind kept wandering to Hunter's troubles. After dinner, with Hunter still absent, she slipped out to the barn to check on her wagon. She found Frank instead, treating a calf's injured leg. Miss Dawson, he acknowledged with a nod. Looking for something? Just checking my wagon. She hesitated, then asked, Is it true the ranch is in trouble? Frank's weathered face creased with worry. Hunter's a good rancher, but he's had nothing but bad breaks since Eliza died. Bank's about to call in the loan. Without a miracle, he'll lose everything by spring. Grace ran her hand along the splintered wagon wheel, considering. I know something about bad luck, Mr. Wilkins. Frank looked up sharply. Do you now? She didn't elaborate, but instead asked, May I see where the cattle were lost? Frank studied her curiously before nodding. First light tomorrow, don't know what good it'll do though. When Hunter returned late that night, Grace was waiting on the porch, a shawl wrapped around her shoulders against the cold. Jenkins refused the extension, he said flatly, dismounting with weary movements. Said I was a bad investment. Grace stood, gathering her courage. Mr. Daniels, I'd like to make you an offer. Hunter looked up, surprised. An offer? I need somewhere to stay for a while and you need help. I know about livestock, crops, and other things. Hunter's expression turned guarded. What other things? Grace took a deep breath. I know about reading the land, weather patterns. I know medicines that can help your animals. People have called me, many things because of this knowledge. Understanding dawned in Hunter's eyes. That's why you're traveling alone. They called you a witch. Grace flinched but held his gaze. They did. Hunter was silent for a long moment. My cattle keep dying, my crops fail, and now the bank's ready to take everything. Some folks already whisper that the double D is cursed. He laughed bitterly. What's one more curse? I'm not cursed, Mr. Daniels, and neither is your ranch. Just unlucky, perhaps. Hunter studied her face in the moonlight. Stay through spring, he finally said. Help if you can, I've got nothing to lose anyway. The next morning, Grace rode out with Frank to the flooded pasture. The water had receded, leaving behind mud and debris. Grace dismounted, examining the ground carefully. Water shouldn't have risen this high, she murmured, tracing patterns in the mud. Not with the rain we had, Frank frowned. Been happening all winter, random floods even when the rain's not heavy. Grace followed the water's path back to the river, noting how it curved unnaturally around a pile of debris. Someone's been damming it, she said suddenly. See here, these aren't natural blockages. Frank crouched beside her, eyes widening. Who would do such a thing? Grace stood, brushing mud from her skirts. Someone who benefits from your misfortune. When they returned to the ranch, Hunter was working in the corral with a nervous young horse. Grace watched his gentle patience, the way he spoke softly to the animal until it calmed. Mr. Daniels, she called, we found something you should see. Hunter listened intently as Grace explained about the deliberate damming of the stream. His face darkened with anger. Jenkins, he spat. His land borders mine to the north. He's been trying to buy the double D for years. You need proof, Grace cautioned. Hunter nodded grimly. And I need to stop losing cattle in the meantime. Over the next week, Grace proved her worth. She showed Hunter how to predict the weather more accurately by observing wildlife behavior. She created poultices for the cattle suffering from hoof rot, using herbs she gathered from the surrounding land. Each morning, they rode out together to check the herd, moving them to safer ground based on Grace's predictions. Martha watched their growing companionship with knowing eyes. "That girl's bringing life back to him," she confided to Frank one evening. "Haven't seen him smile this much since Eliza." But in town, whispers began. A mysterious woman at the Double D, cattle suddenly recovering, weather changing when she predicted. The same old fears dressed in new clothes. The first confrontation came on a crisp March morning. Hunter and Grace had ridden to town for supplies when three men blocked their path outside the general store. "Heard you got yourself a witch out at your place, Daniels," one sneered. "That why your luck's suddenly changing?" Hunter stepped in front of Grace protectively. "Miss Dawson is my guest, Miller. Step aside." Miller spat on the ground. "My boy's horse went lame same day she rode past our place. Coincidence? Your boy rides that poor animal into the ground," Hunter replied evenly. "Nothing mysterious about that." Grace touched Hunter's arm gently. "It's all right. I'm used to this." The quiet dignity in her voice seemed to infuriate Miller more. "We don't want your kind here. Bad enough dealing with Indians and outlaws without adding witches to the mix." A crowd was gathering now, some curious, others hostile. Grace felt the familiar cold dread settling in her stomach. "That's enough." Hunter's voice cut through the murmurs. "Miss Dawson has done nothing but help since she arrived. She's figured out who's been sabotaging my ranch, something none of you bothered to investigate when I complained about unusual flooding." This revelation caused a stir. Jenkins emerged from the crowd, his face flushed. "What lies are you spreading, Daniels?" "No lies," Grace spoke clearly. "The stream feeding the Double D has been deliberately dammed multiple times, causing floods that killed Mr. Daniels' cattle. We have proof." Sheriff Wilson pushed through the gathering. "Serious accusation, miss. Care to back it up?" Hunter produced a folded paper from his coat. "Map marking the locations, plus this." He held up a distinctive whittled stake. "Found these holding the debris in place, same carving as the ones marking Jenkins' property line." The sheriff examined the evidence, his expression grave. "Looks like I need to ask some questions, Jenkins." As Jenkins was led away protesting, the crowd's mood shifted. Several people approached to offer Hunter support or apologize for believing the rumors. The ride back to the ranch was quiet until Hunter finally spoke. "You didn't deserve that. No matter how many times it happens, it can't get easier." Grace stared at the horizon. "It doesn't, but I've learned to survive it." Hunter's hand covered hers briefly. "You've done more than help my ranch, Grace. You've reminded me what it means to stand for something." Spring arrived in earnest by early April. The ranch flourished under their combined efforts. The cattle grew stronger with Grace's remedies, and new calves were born healthy. Hunter implemented her suggestions for crop rotation, and the first shoots of corn emerged in neat rows. One evening, as sunset painted the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks, Hunter found Grace sitting on the porch steps, writing in her journal. "Beautiful, isn't it?" he said, settling beside her. Grace nodded, closing her journal. "I've seen many sunsets in many places, but none quite like the ones here." Hunter took a deep breath. "Jenkins is going to jail. Sheriff found evidence he's been sabotaging other small ranches too, trying to buy up land cheap." "That's good news." Grace smiled, but there was something wistful in her expression. Hunter studied her profile. "You're thinking of leaving?" It wasn't a question, but Grace answered anyway. "The wagon's fixed, the weather's good for traveling." "And the whispers have started again," Hunter added quietly. Grace turned to face him. "They always will, Hunter. It's the way of things." "Doesn't have to be." His hand found hers, warm and calloused. "Not here." Grace looked down at their intertwined fingers. "I've never stayed anywhere long enough to find out." "Stay," Hunter said simply. "Not as my ranch hand or my miracle worker. Stay because I think I'm falling in love with you, Grace Dawson." Grace's breath caught. "You don't know everything about me." "I know enough," Hunter insisted. "I know you're brilliant and kind. I know you've been hurt by ignorance. I know my ranch, my life has found new purpose since you arrived." A single tear traced down Grace's cheek. "What if the rumors never stop? What if your business suffers because of me?" Hunter gently wiped away her tear. "Then we'll face it together. This ranch was dying, Grace." You didn't just save my herd, you saved my hope. Grace leaned into his touch, allowing herself to imagine what staying might mean. I've never belonged anywhere, she whispered. You belong here, Hunter said firmly, if you want to. Their first kiss was tentative, a question asked and answered in the soft press of lips. When they pulled apart, Grace saw her own wonder reflected in Hunter's eyes. Yes, she said simply, I'll stay. Word spread through the territory that Hunter Daniels had proposed to the mysterious Grace Dawson. Some still whispered witch behind their hands, but others, those whose animals Grace had healed or whose children she had treated for fever, defended her fiercely. They married on the first day of May, beneath the blossoming apple tree behind the main house. Martha had sewn Grace a simple white dress, and Frank stood proudly beside Hunter as his best man. The local preacher, initially hesitant, had been won over by Grace's generous donation of medicinal herbs for his ailing wife. After the small gathering dispersed, Hunter led Grace to a hill overlooking the ranch. Spring had transformed the land, lush green pastures dotted with healthy cattle, fields promising abundant crops, wildflowers painting the landscape in vibrant colors. I have a wedding gift for you, Hunter said, producing a small wooden box. Inside, Grace found a delicate silver pendant shaped like a hummingbird. Eliza always said hummingbirds were good luck, Hunter explained softly. They represent joy, healing, and resilience, like you. Grace's eyes filled with tears as he fastened the necklace around her throat. It's beautiful. There's more, Hunter said, taking her hand. Come. He led her to the empty field beyond the orchard. A foundation had been laid out with lumber stacked nearby. What is this? Grace asked, confused. Hunter's smile was both shy and proud. I thought you might like your own place to work. An herb garden here, he pointed to a sunny patch, and a workshop where you can prepare your medicines. Grace stood speechless, overwhelmed by the thought he had put into this gift. No one had ever embraced her knowledge this way, as something valuable rather than fearsome. You're not afraid people will talk even more? She finally asked. Hunter shook his head. Let them talk. Jenkins' arrest showed folks that real problems come from greed and dishonesty, not mysterious women with knowledge of herbs. He squeezed her hand. Besides, 3 families have already asked if you might help with their sick livestock. Seems fear gives way pretty quick when livelihoods are at stake. Grace turned in a slow circle, envisioning the space filled with drying herbs, workbenches, carefully labeled bottles. A place where she could practice her knowledge openly without shame. Hunter Daniels, she said, voice thick with emotion, you are a remarkable man. Just a man who recognizes a blessing when it walks into his life, he replied, drawing her into his arms. Even if it did arrive in a broken-down wagon with a stubborn streak wider than the Montana sky, Grace laughed, the sound carrying across the land that had become her home. That stubborn streak saved your herd, Cowboy. And my heart, Hunter added softly before kissing her again. As summer approached, the Double D thrived. The calving season proved the most successful in years. The crops grew strong, unhampered by drought or flood. And if some still crossed the street when Grace walked through town, many more stopped to ask her advice or thank her for previous help. Grace's workshop was completed by mid-June, a bright, airy building that soon filled with the fragrant scents of drying herbs and brewing remedies. Hunter often found her there, hair tied back, sleeves rolled up, utterly absorbed in her work. In those moments, watching her confident movements and serene expression, he fell in love with her all over again. One evening, as they sat on their porch watching the sunset, Grace took Hunter's hand and placed it gently over her stomach. I have news, she said, her voice trembling slightly. Hunter's eyes widened. Are you certain? Grace nodded, her face glowing. Martha confirmed it. By winter there will be 3 of us. Hunter gathered her in his arms, his joy too great for words. After Eliza and their baby died, he had closed off that chamber of his heart, believing it forever sealed. Now Grace had somehow found the key. I thought my life was over when I lost Eliza, he murmured against her hair. Then you arrived, a stranger everyone called cursed, and brought everything back to life. Grace nestled against him, no longer afraid of what tomorrow might bring. Sometimes what looks like a curse is really a blessing in disguise. Hunter kissed her forehead gently, nothing disguised about it. You're the most powerful blessing that ever rolled into the Montana territory, Grace Daniels. Their laughter mingled in the evening air, rising above the ranch that had become a symbol of their unlikely love story, a tale of a cursed woman and a hopeless cowboy who saved each other against all odds. By the following spring, when their daughter was born beneath the same apple tree where they had exchanged their vows, the whispers had largely faded. In their place grew a quiet respect for the family at the Double D, where cattle thrived, crops flourished, and a small herb garden produced remedies sought after throughout the territory. Hunter would sometimes tell their daughter the story of how her mother had arrived like a miracle when all seemed lost, saving not just his herd but his hope. And Grace would smile, touching the silver hummingbird at her throat, grateful for the stubborn cowboy who had defended her when everyone else saw only a curse. In the wildness of the Montana territory, they had found in each other the rarest treasure of all, a place to belong, exactly as they were.